The next speaker that I'd like to introduce is from Stop CSG Illawarra, a very active group with over 4,000 members. They have really helped us. Chris Williams and Jess Moore from there have helped us in organising and getting the insurance that was required for this event today. The Illawarra is in a very sensitive water catchment area. Jess is right and very and truly well aware of the various issues that threaten our pristine water catchment areas and our wilderness areas. She's also has a lot to talk about with regards to the biased industry claims about the so-called safety of CSG. So please would you give a rounding welcome to Jess Moore from Stop CSG Illawarra.
Thank you, Len. Now, before I start, I've just been asked to point to Fred here because he's walking around with a donations bucket. And of course, getting rallies like today organised, unfortunately, costs money, and there's a constant need for us to fundraise for events like this. There's one up the back, I'm also told. Up in the yellow vest holding the bucket. I'm Jess and I'm from Stop CSG Illawarra, like many people here today. Now, for the last 2 years, we're a group that turns to this month, fortunately or unfortunately. We've been fighting to stop the development of coal seam gas across the upper Nepean and Woronora drinking water catchments. Now, over 60% of people's drinking water in New South Wales, the drinking water for over 60% of people in New South Wales comes from land that covers less than 2% of New South Wales. So some people would say that 2% of land's pretty damn important. Now, that land is so important that if I walk there, I can be fined up to $44,000. It's so protected that I can be fined up to $44,000 just for setting foot there. These are the Sydney Catchment Authority special areas. Now, at the same time as I'm told I can't walk there because it's so protected, coal seam gas mining companies have been given licence to drill in these areas, and they've been given permission to drill in these areas. There's already a well that's been drilled in the Warragamba catchment area, and in 2009 and 2011, a combination of those two times, a further 11 wells were approved to be drilled in the Woronora and Upper Nepean drinking water catchments. Now, neither state or federal governments have legislation in place to protect these areas. Seems pretty silly. I can't believe sometimes that I'm up here saying this. This incredibly precious land, neither federal or state governments will protect it from coal seam gas. Before the election, Barry O'Farrell promised the next National Liberal government will ensure that mining cannot occur in any water catchment area, and that mining leases and mining exploration licences will reflect that common sense. No ifs, no buts, a guarantee. They were his words. He promised us that these areas would be protected. Since he made that promise, he's renewed 3 licences across drinking water catchment areas. He's approved a well in the Warragamba catchment area. His government has approved a well in the Upper Nepean drinking water catchment area. The federal government last week made an announcement. This announcement came from Tony Burke, that the federal government will now protect our water resources. Now, I'm sure, like many of you, I gave a huge sigh of relief. That's great. The federal government's going to step in. They're going to protect our water resources. But now we see the changes to the Act, and they don't do that. Drinking water catchments don't even get a mention. Exactly what would be considered damage is not defined under the Act. It's an incredibly general statement about protection of water resources federally that isn't going to protect us. In fact, it relies on companies to report that they will do damage in order for it to be referred to the Act. Companies have to say, we will do significant damage to water resources, and on that basis, the federal government will look into it. It also makes the Environment Minister a single minister responsible for the decision. Sure, they have to take advice into consideration, advice from the Independent Expert Scientific Committee, but it's just advice for consideration. Even if that committee finds that it's going to do significant damage to water resources, the minister might say, no, that's okay, I think it's fine, it can go ahead. So none of this ensures protection of our water resources. Now, the reality of the situation right now is that the Illawarra project is at a standstill, but it won't stay that way. So in 2009, a 15-well coal seam gas project was approved for the Illawarra. Now that project, in that project, 10 of the wells are actually in those special areas, that 2% of land that provides drinking water to 60% of people in New South Wales. The campaign then kicked off to stop it, and the campaign in the Illawarra has been so successful that to date it has managed to prevent drilling of any one of those wells. But subsequently, and from our state government, who promised us it would be banned, these would become no-go areas for coal seam gas development, we've had an overhaul of the board of the Sydney catchment. So for the first time in its history, that board does not have a single health expert, and it's headed by a former mining executive. That's how our board has been rejigged. We've had licences reapproved over catchment areas, and worse still, I would say there are 5 major catchments in the Sydney Catchment Authority special areas. All 5 are either encroached on or covered by exploration licences. That is still the case. This government has renewed 3 of those licences in the last 6 months. And at this stage, the decision about the 16 wells in the Illawarra has gone back to the Planning Assessment Commission. We managed to delay drilling past drilling deadlines. That is, they went for 3 years without being able to drill, and so it had to go back to the Planning Assessment Commission, ridiculously still under Part 3A. That legislation that we're told is repealed, that's where this decision is again being made. And this community is in limbo because we're waiting for these experts to make a decision on whether or not this company, these incredibly under-resourced companies, Apex Energy and Magnum Gas and Power, the 2 smallest CSG companies in Australia, can drill in our drinking water catchment. Now this is incredibly frightening because the argument the government gave, the government has recommended approval, so it's clear, but the decision lies with the Commission. And the government recommended reapproval because they said, oh, the company already did the assessment. They said it was safe. Now we know it's safe, so just reapprove it. That's what the government is saying about this project. And now we've got this commission. Now one of the 2 commissioners actually works for the industry. He works, his company, the company he heads, actually does work for AGL, one of the biggest coal seam gas companies in the state. Now if that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what is. But we were told that it's fine. He should be there. He should be one of the 2 decision makers deciding whether or not coal seam gas mining can go ahead in our drinking water catchment again. It's gone way past when they should have made a decision. It's supposed to take a couple of weeks. It's been over a month, and we're still waiting. But I guess the key thing to say is that this community, the community in the Illawarra, is resolved to stop it. Now, just to talk briefly about the particular threats posed by coal seam gas mining to our drinking water catchment, coal seam gas mining always involves drawing contaminated water out of the ground. It always involves drawing water that is high in salt, it's high in methane, it can contain toxic and radioactive compounds and heavy metals. It means drawing that water out of the ground in our drinking water catchment. It means taking toxins into our drinking water catchment to help with the drilling and to pump those toxins into the ground in our drinking water catchment. Coal seam gas mining always involves leaking methane, which is a frightening thing in and of itself, but also factor in the fact that this project has been previously approved in an area where there's been a major bushfire every year. That's where we're going to put leaking gas wells. In fact, we've actually got a photo of one of the proposed sites, a streamer in a tree. And then we took a photo a bit later, and that photo showed a bushfire tearing through a proposed CSG site, an enormous risk for people of the Illawarra. There's also enormous existing damage to the catchment that's been caused by longwall coal mining. And so this proposal is being layered on top of enormous damage. But of course, the government doesn't say they need to factor in cumulative impacts. They're just looking at the coal seam gas wells. It's also a hugely unstable area. We've had huge landslip in the Illawarra, and the communities there all live below this escarpment, this unstable escarpment that they're going to drill into, that they're going to They're actually saying they're not going to frack. They're going to do something called zero radius drilling, which is another word for fracking. But they're going to stimulate the ground and the entire community in the Illawarra, in the northern Illawarra, actually lives beneath that ground, below that ground. Now, the campaign in the Illawarra has been enormous, and it's been an incredible thing to be a part of. We've had 3 rallies of over 3,000 people. We've collected tens of thousands of signatures. We've been going door to door asking people in suburbs whether or not they want to see coal seam gas banned in our suburbs, banned in our drinking water catchment, and we've had figures of 96, 97% of residents wanting to see a ban in the catchment. So this is a community resolve to stop this. And we vowed to blockade, and that's not a decision we take lightly. We have done everything the government has told us we have to do to stop this, and we are left with no choice. If the Planning Assessment Commission comes back with a decision to approve, our community must blockade. We have been forced to take on our own government to do an incredibly simple thing. I'm sure that so many of you here thought before you got involved in this campaign you wouldn't have to fight your own government to get your drinking water protected. But that is the situation that we are in. And the main thing I want to say today is that this isn't just a fight for the people of the Illawarra. This is the drinking water for the people of Greater Sydney. It's the drinking water supply for over 2/3 of people in New South Wales. And this message has to go to that 2/3 of people. It can't just be a campaign in the Illawarra. It can't just be the people of the Illawarra protecting the drinking water supply for the people of Greater Sydney. We need Sydney mobilised in this fight. We need you on our blockade. We need you on the streets talking to people, because this is a fight for all of our drinking water. Thank you so much.